Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
By the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and as always, I am so happy to be with you for another book review, another author interview, another book review podcast, I guess is where I was going with that sentence before I seemed to lose my train of thought midstream. Losing my train of thought, mixing my metaphors. It's going to be a good show. For those of you who are longtime listeners, you will probably recognize that I'm starting to sound a little scratchy, a little sinusy. You will not be surprised by this information because this is a regular occurrence for me, and spring starts early here in Northern California, so definitely have some allergies going on. But as I mentioned at the end of the last episode, I am speaking at this time with author Shelley Buck about her book, Leave Your Light On, the musical mantra left behind by an illuminating spirit. The authors are actually listed as Shelley Buck and Ryder Buck, with Kathy Curtis. Ryder is Shelley's son, and Kathy is a longtime family friend who helped, assisted, whatever word you want to use, in the writing of this book. So let me go ahead and give you the description on the back. Singer and songwriter Ryder Buck was a young man with an unstoppable dream to lift people up through his music. But a threatening cancer diagnosis showed that life had other plans. While the disease should have beaten him, Ryder rose above it all to live from a place of passion. Then fate stepped in. Leave Your Light On is the song Ryder wrote that became his mantra. In this uplifting and powerful story, you'll meet an unforgettable character determined to accept his own quirks and flaws with humor. You'll see a parent-child relationship tested by unrelenting disease. And you'll get a guide for shining your light, no matter what life or death throws your way. Though it wasn't cancer that took Ryder, it was the catalyst that helped him grow into the shining spirit he became. His journey of love, courage, and truth will convince you that there is no challenge big enough to keep you from putting your special touch on the world, if you simply leave your light on. So this really is, it's part memoir, it's part love letter, it's part, there's so many different layers to this because it really is Shelley's love letter to her son's memory and his legacy that he has left behind, but there's parts of it that are written from pieces. There are parts of it that are taken from some of Ryder's writings, whether those were some of his college papers or his journals that he kept, and so Ryder's voice is present throughout the book as well as through his songwriting. So you get Ryder's perspective, you get Shelley's perspective as a mother. It really is kind of a memoir of Ryder's journey, his own journey through cancer, but also his family's journey with him in that process. He has two brothers, and of course his parents were going through that with him. And even though I knew the premise of the book before I started reading, Ryder got through the cancer, as it mentions here. He survived cancer, and I was feeling so hopeful and so optimistic, and then I still was shocked when the accident happened, and I just, oh my gosh, I was still thrown for a loop, even though I knew it was coming. And it doesn't mention specifically in the description on the back, so I'm not going to mention it specifically either, but I just want you to go in with your eyes a little more open than mine were, because I was so full of optimism. But this really is a lovely tribute, I think, to a son, to a friend. There are quotes from Ryder's friends. There are experiences that Shelley has had where she has felt Ryder's presence since his death, and then those are here in the book. There's a part that just touched me. Several people went and got tattoos after Ryder's passing, one of whom was his grandmother, and she was 84 at the time. She was the oldest customer at the place that did their tattoos. And I don't know, I just thought that was really, really so sweet. It's also, that mantra of leave your light on, and Shelley really explores that concept of what does it mean to leave your light on? What does it mean to shine that light so others can see it? How does she feel that Ryder is still sending this message throughout the world, throughout the universe, and how is she carrying on that legacy? So let's go ahead and turn to the interview with Shelley. Again, the book is called Leave Your Light On, the musical mantra left behind by an illuminating spirit, by Shelley Buck and Ryder Buck, with Kathy Curtis.
Hi, Shelley. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am happy to have you here. We are here to talk about your book. It's called Leave Your Light On, the musical mantra left behind by an illuminating spirit. Before we get to the book, though, if you would start by telling us just a little bit about yourself, that would be wonderful.
Okay, well, my story really started when I was a little girl in the Midwest, growing up in and around Chicago. I saw my first Disney feature, Sleeping Beauty, when I was maybe 5 years old, and I was captivated. The magic, the colors, the styling, and I knew from that time that I wanted to work at Disney. And so I stayed at home with my family through college in Illinois, but then moved to California on my own at 25 to work at Disney. And there I met my husband and started having my 3 sons, and Ryder was my first. So that's how I came to live here and the beginnings of our family life.
Yeah, and which is interesting. I mean, the fact that you met your husband at Disney could be a whole book on its own, I think, and all of and everything that he does with his his career in animation, and you're working at Disney before the children, but this really does focus on your oldest son, Ryder. So again, the book is called Leave Your Light On. Can you give an overview of the book?
The book starts when Ryder was very, very young, as an infant, and I started learning from him when he was that age that I needed to take down my energy to meet him where he lived. He was a very calm baby, introspective child, observant and wise beyond his years. So he was the flip side of my coin. I call us soulmates because that's what it became clear that we really were, though we were very, very different in our approach to the world. Ryder grew up, as I said, a calm character and meditative. He took up music after his dinosaur fascination and drawing. He took up music and started playing guitar in high school, and soon formed a band, and they played all over the LA area. And when he was 22 and still in college, he was diagnosed with stage 4 testicular cancer. That was the beginning of my writing. I kept an online journal through CaringBridge and wrote every day. I stayed in the hospital with him every day that he was in, and then he was outpatient for 2 weeks. And we made it through the cancer. He was declared clear, and that was a jubilant time for us. At that point, he was almost 23. And that summer, he went to Bali to study music and continued to do gigs around the LA area with his band. And at the end of October, just 1 month before my husband's film Frozen was released, Ryder was hit by 2 cars on the freeway and died.
Yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, when I read that, I was like, I mean, I knew that he, you know, because of the nature of the book, I knew that he was no longer living, but I was heartbroken with you, because of the, you know, just the journey and the fact that he'd survived cancer, but then that, you know, just
yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. You said that you started writing on the Caring Bridge website, which a lot of people will be familiar with. Maybe some people won't, but that's a place that you can update friends and family on, in this case, your son's ongoing journey with cancer, so that, you know, you don't have to keep repeating yourself. But it's a place
Right.
that people can sign into and read. So
It's time for our first break of the podcast, but as I was reading the book and as I was speaking with Shelley during our interview, it just kept striking me how hard and how, in some ways, wonderful it must have been to go through the writing of this book, to not only write it, but to go through some of Ryder's own writings and his song lyrics and those things, and how that would both bring him closer and in some ways make his loss harder. And we're going to talk, when we come back from the break, a little bit about how Shelley went about the process of putting this book together, deciding what went in the book, sifting through all of that, all of those memories, the writings, etc. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with Shelley Buck about her tribute to her son, Ryder. Again, the book is called Leave Your Light On. Let's go ahead and get back to the interview with Shelley.
what was the process that you went through in deciding that you would make those writings and Ryder's writings and other things into a book?
Well, I didn't stop writing when Ryder passed. Of course, I continued to need to be in touch with people. I found it very cathartic and healing to put my feelings and thoughts into words and down on paper. So I continued this journal for another 5 years after Ryder's passing. And at some point, a couple of people said, Shelley, this is really good. You need to write a book. And I said, yeah, well, okay, a little modest, a little hesitant, not sure of even my capability of doing something like that. And then Ryder piped up from the other side and said, through a friend, Mom, write my story. I'll be there to help. And that was the tipping point. That was where I said, okay, this has to happen. So I went about finding a co-author because they had to take this journal into narrative form. And I didn't have to look any further than my best friend, my lifelong best friend, Kathy Curtis, who is a writer and does writing programs for dealing with grief and transitions, and has had programs throughout the Midwest where she's helped people through writing programs to heal. So Kathy was the perfect fit. We know each other intimately. We've been best friends since we were 12. And she knows my family. She knows Ryder. And he made his presence known to her on a daily basis. So we went through about a 2-year journey of transcribing my journals into the book that you have read. And yeah, that was quite a journey.
I can imagine. I mean, I can just imagine how cathartic it would have been, but also, difficult at times. I want to touch on something that you said. You said that Ryder told you, yes, do the book, and I'll be there to help you, and also made his presence known to your friend Kathy. Can you talk about, because you talk about this in the book quite a bit, is how Ryder is still with you, how you feel he is still communicating with you, and that you are still hearing messages from him. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Certainly. I get his voice in my ear whenever I'm agitated, which happens a lot. I still have 2 other sons, and one of them is a storm. And if we came across a sticking point in the book, or I would be frustrated with something, I could hear Ryder's voice saying, "Chill, Mom, it's going to be fine. Just chill out." And that was one of his favorite things to say in life. So this voice comes to me periodically. I've had visits in dream states where he's shown up and done little tricks for me, turning himself into a ball of light. And there was another instance where my husband was getting massage, and Ryder showed up and said, "Dad, let's fly." So they flew across this broad field and dove into the ocean, and there were dolphins, one of Ryder's favorite animals. And he said, "Dad, we don't have to swim with them. We can be them." And they dove into the creatures and swam as them. And then Ryder took off, and that was the end of that little visit. But that was one that was very poignant and still sticks with my husband to this day. He's shown up in through the dog. He had a golden retriever when he first was diagnosed with cancer. We rescued a golden retriever, which was his dream dog. And this dog was like a living rug. He really barely moved. And one day, shortly after Ryder passed, I was sitting quietly weeping beside the pool out back, and the dog was probably 30 yards away from me taking a nap. And suddenly he got up and came over and put his paw on my lap as if to say, "It's okay." We had, that dog did things like that periodically as long as he lived. We considered him a channel for Ryder. There was another time when one of Ryder's girlfriends was over, and this dog, Bear, who's normally, like I said, just this lump on the ground, was so agitated and active and running around in circles. And I saw this ball of light fly through the room, and I thought someone had thrown a tennis ball. And I looked, and no one was there. It was just his girlfriend and me, and this golden ball of light that flew through the room. So we've had his presence in small and big ways ever since his passing, and he continues to show up. And I talk to him before I go to sleep at night, and occasionally get messages from him then, generally about the book, he's very pleased, and he keeps saying, it's going to be fine. Don't worry. Keep going. So he is still a huge part of my life, and that's the way I need for it to be, lest I disintegrate.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You've mentioned light several times, and that is, in the title of the book, Leave Your Light On. Talk about light and Ryder. First, you've mentioned the lights that you've seen, the glowing lights that you've seen after his passing, but talk about light in terms of Ryder's life.
His spirit was so big, and he followed his own inner light, his own bliss, with absolute conviction. He knew what made him happy, and he did it. Sometimes it was delightful to see, and sometimes it was aggravating. When he was in the middle of his cancer treatments and during his outpatient periods, he was never home. He would spend a day or two on the couch just kind of recuperating from the treatment, and then he would be off and running up the coast, down to the beach, up to the mountains, Dodger Stadium, you name it, whatever made him happy, concerts. He followed this, and I think it helped him grow and grow his light by just being true to himself. And that's a lot of what this book is about, is being true to your own inner light, what brings you your passion and what brings you joy. And this is a character who did exactly that, and kind of it's kind of a how-to book.
It is. It's in part memoir. It's partly your experiences as a parent going through this with her son and her family. It's in part, I don't want to say a how-to book, but just.
Yeah, that's probably stretching it, but yeah.
No, but I can't. I'm having trouble coming up with words today. Sorry, but kind of this. I don't have the right word, but for just encouraging people to follow that path and to be true to themselves as much as possible. So in light of that message, what do you hope readers might take from the book?
I hope that, though it has some sadness and tragedy in it, that's just a vehicle for the lessons that Ryder taught us, which were to let go, take it easy, chill, and be yourself. And finding that own inner light in yourself and in others helps you stay connected to people in life and even in death. So what brings you joy is your light, your creativity. There are myriad ways to express your inner light, whether I make jewelry, cooking, gardening. Writing is a great way to get feelings out and to grow from the process. So my hope is that people will be inspired to live their best lives, and take an example from this kid who went through, facing his own mortality and then having to find a way to continue to be in touch even after he was removed from this earth. I think that's the main thing. The light is there, and it's available to all of us.
Right, and just to keep an eye out for it.
Right.
It's time for our second break of the podcast, but I really do love the way that Shelley has been able to turn this process this grief, this huge, overwhelming series of events that happened in her life and her family's life, and turn it into this book of positivity, of reminding people of the difference that they can make in the lives of other people when they allow their gifts to shine through, when they allow their light to shine, and just that mantra can be anyone's mantra, to leave your light on, to know what it is that brings joy to other people and how your light shines that joy out into the world. So we're going to go ahead and take our second break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets Podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets Podcast is for you. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with Shelley Buck about her book, Leave Your Light On, the musical mantra left behind by an illuminating spirit. It is, of course, about her son, Ryder Buck. Let's go ahead and return now to the interview with Shelley.
The book is, obviously it's from your perspective, but it's not only from your perspective. You do have some writings of Ryder's from some of his college papers, which made me smile and made me think, I don't even think my college papers are accessible. They're on a floppy disk somewhere. I don't know if anybody can read a floppy disk. But talk about the process of choosing which pieces of Ryder's writing to include.
Well, we tried to find the ones that were the most introspective and philosophical, and he was that a lot. He kept a journal. He wrote a little bit on Caring Bridge when he was in the hospital, but I had papers from him from grade school about his aspirations and what he wanted to do with his life. And so these were the kinds of works I was looking for, something that spoke of his spirit and his hopes and dreams, and the way his philosophy. I mean, he was a deep character. When we went to the hospital for his inpatient weeks, we always had at least a dozen books, and many of them were the spiritual teachers of our world. And he dove into those and took from many different cultures and many different spiritual paths. So I was looking for things that reflected that journey for him. And because this was the growth period that was it was exponential. I mean, he was always a mature kid, but when he started going through the cancer treatment and facing his own possible death, he looked deeper and his thoughts became richer. And those were the things we wanted to include in the book. We also included a couple of his songs. One of them that he sent posthumously is in there. It came, of course, without music, but one of his bandmates wrote the music to it, and that's on the audiobook. But the title of the book, Leave Your Light On, is actually the title of the first song Ryder ever wrote. And it really wasn't until much later that I got the depth of the meaning of that song. He was speaking about his own inner light and that of others, and the way he connected to people was by listening, really being present. and it made people feel valued. And so his connections were deep and lifelong. I mean, he had some of his friends from preschool all the way through his life. When he met someone whose heart he appreciated, he did the work to keep connected.
And that's the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that there's points of view from other people, so from friends, family, his brothers, etc. And again, how did you determine which writings to include, and where did those come from?
Well, that was hard because there were so many wonderful stories. When I put out the request, we had professors and peers and friends and family. At his service, his celebration of life, we put out cards, index cards, large ones, that people could write memories of Ryder and stories and leave for us. And we got so many beautiful stories, and it was really hard. There were some that just had to be left out, but we chose what we thought were the best. There was one girl who wrote about really feeling despondent, like she didn't really want to live anymore, and just meeting Ryder and experiencing his joy of living and looking at what he had been through with the cancer and still feeling not a victim but privileged to be in this life, changed her way of looking at life and really basically walked her back from the brink. That was an important one. And of course, the memories of family, sometimes you're so close to something it's hard to write about it, but my boys both had a couple of poignant things to say about their experience with Ryder's passing, and of course those would be included. But just they were really anecdotal stories of experience with Ryder and his light.
This is a very specific book on the journey that your son went through, the journey that you took with him, as well as his passing. But do you feel like you might write other books?
Well, I didn't think I would write this one, so there's no telling. As you said, there is more to be said, and certainly we could write about the way this affected my husband, his work, the way the whole Disney story ties into the way we raised the boys, and the fact that Frozen 2 has a couple of tributes to Ryder in it. One is a character named Ryder, who embodies Ryder's, romantic, chill character. And then there was also a song called The Next Right Thing that was written partly inspired by Ryder and our journey through his passing. There's a lot more that could be said on this topic, but I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know if there'll be another book.
Sure. I think your next book should be about Grandma Dot. I just love that she went. That at 84 she joined in the trip to the tattoo parlor and got a tattoo.
Oh yeah, she was their oldest client to date, and she's almost 91 now. So.
Oh wow. Yeah,
still sporting her tattoo.
Yes, that's wonderful. Do you have? I often ask for, if authors have advice for other authors. Your journey is so specific, and your reason for writing is so specific. But do you have advice for other people who may want to write a story like this, a memoir like this?
Well, what worked for me and served our book best was that what I wrote was from my heart. It wasn't in my head. It was just as I would speak, and the things that I was feeling become the most authentic stories. So writing from the heart is really important. I would say, it was suggested to me that I get a ghostwriter to help me put this together. It just happened that I had a best friend who was more than qualified on many levels to help me, but there's always a need for an objective perspective because it's such a journey to write a book, to get it edited, to put it together and package it so that it's something you can launch into the world. And, I would have been lost without having a sounding board and someone that I trusted to help bring out the best in me and add to it.
Thank you for that. You love Disney, obviously.
Yes.
But when you take the time to read, I don't know if you're a big reader or not, but do you have favorite authors or genres?
Oh, I do, and it started when I was young with The Hobbit and the trilogy of Tolkien. I read that several times, and I don't do reruns, as I tell my boys. But I love fantasy. I love inspirational books. Ryder implored us to read Proof of Heaven by Eben Alexander his last summer. When he went to Bali, he left us with a copy and he said, "You have to read this." Well, he had been going through this, this study of mortality and was really moved by it. And it helped us a lot when he eventually passed that we had read this. I pulled a couple of others off the bookshelf today that I have kept my whole life that I still love. Mutant Message Down Under, The Celestine Prophecy, and one of my favorite books, probably the thickest book I ever read, was Myths of Avalon. So I'm kind of all over the map. I've been reading biographies lately because there are so many notable characters in our world these days that truth is stranger than fiction sometimes. So I've been reading some biographies.
Yes, it absolutely is.
Time to take our third and final break of the podcast. When we come back, let's talk about dinosaurs. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with Shelley Buck.
Ryder went through a pretty heavy dinosaur phase as a child. Did he have favorite dinosaur books? I know that's kind of a random question, but...
Oh my gosh. You know what? Yes. There was a dinosaur encyclopedia that I got for him that was almost as big as he was. And one day we were in the car and he had this thing open in the back seat in his little car seat. And he said, "Mom, this is a picture of a Corythosaurus, but it says Lambeosaurus." Now, he wasn't reading yet. I don't know how he figured that out. He probably knew some of his letters and figured out the beginning letters of the word. But I was floored. I had to pull over and check. And he was absolutely right. So yes, he has. We still have shelves of dinosaur books, poetry, reference books, picture books, pop-up books. Ryder was an avid reader from the very beginning. We kept books on the shelves that augmented what we were going through, what Chris's work entailed. When he did Pocahontas, we did all Native American tales for a few years. Because these projects take years to make, we had time to grow with him. When he did Tarzan, we read about Coco the gorilla. But yes, Ryder's passion for years were dinosaurs.
I love that. That's wonderful. I know you have a website. It's not the easiest to find because there is another Shelley Buck who is an author, and she is not you.
No.
So if you could go ahead.
Yes, we have a website strictly for the book called leaveyourlightonbook.com. And if you want to reach me and learn more about Ryder and hear more of his music and see his videos, he has a website called ryderbuckmusic.com, and that's Ryder with a Y. And there is a contact page there where people can reach me directly through email. And like I said, there are songs available, there are stories, pictures, videos, and on either site you can order the book. And I have a website for my jewelry called shellrae.com, SHELRAE. So I'm all of those places on the internet.
All right, thank you for that. Any social media people might be able to interact with you on?
Yes, I'm on Facebook as Shelley Buck. That's Shelley with an EY, and Instagram at Shelley Buck with just one L. Ryder has a Facebook page that I keep up under Ryder Buck.
All right,
That's
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Yes. Well, Shelley, we've talked about a lot of different things today, but I know we could have so many more conversations about Ryder and about your experiences, but is there anything that you wanted to specifically mention that we haven't covered at this point in terms of the book or in terms of Ryder, anything that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I just want to emphasize that Ryder took the magic that we created in his youth and his growing up years in our household and embodied it, making him a kind of an otherworldly character, even in life. And I think it's a compelling story. I think he's a more than an interesting character. I think he's a compelling character and one you really get to know through this book. And I've had people say, if you read the reviews on Amazon, people say again and again how inspired they were and how they feel like they know Ryder. They feel like they're a better person for having read the book. So I do hope people will pick it up.
Yeah, this is such a deeply, deeply personal book, and so I want to thank you for coming on the podcast to talk about the book, but especially to talk about Ryder and to share his story with us. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
As always, thank you once again to Shelley for joining me to talk about this legacy that she has created in her son's memory. Again, the book is called Leave Your Light On, and it really is a beautifully written story of love and loss and legacy, if you want to go with alliteration. I was thinking about a couple of things. One is sort of silly. I mean, first of all, Shelley has had some amazing things happen in her life, and this book is one of them. But I was sort of, not giggling necessarily, but like, oh, wow, Shelley's husband worked on the Frozen movies. I mean, that's like 6 degrees of separation of something kind of interesting to me. I don't get out much. So the fact that I interviewed someone who's married to someone else who worked on the Frozen movies, those were very popular with my nieces, and especially the first one. They were right at that age. I mean, it was an age spread, but they sang that soundtrack for months, and it was stuck in my head. And I don't know, I just was like, that's kind of cool. Anyway, I was also thinking about some of the connections that Shelley was talking about and the places that she has felt Ryder's presence or felt like she's received messages from Ryder. And it got me thinking to the interview that I did a few weeks ago with Tracy Richardson, and she was talking about all those connections that happen in life. She didn't necessarily call them connections. I can't remember exactly what her wording was, but there's those times in life when you have that feeling that something before it happens, or you feel like something in the universe is sending you a message. And I thought that those were kind of interesting, that I had 2 somewhat similar conversations in less than a month. I'm always fascinated by how the interviews that I do create connections. And maybe that's kind of what Tracy was talking about in terms of those connections in the world, those things that happen where you just sense something in the universe around you. Never really thought about it that way, but something I will ponder more and try not to blather onto you about on the podcast until I get a clearer picture in my head of what I'm actually trying to say. But interesting, just little fascinating tidbits that I like to throw your way at the end of the episode, and you can learn about the scary place that is my brain, or the weird place that is my brain, the random place that is my brain. Those of you, again, who have listened to this podcast for a long time are sitting there thinking, yeah, Sarah, we already know your brain is a random place. We understand this. It's nothing new. At any rate, thank you once again to Shelley. Thank you, as always, to you, my listeners. You are so very appreciated by me. I just appreciate that you take time out of your day, your week, whatever, to join me and meet new authors and hopefully find new books that are of interest to you. If you have not already done so, please do follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I don't know who the us is. You can find this podcast, me and the authors. There you go. You can find me, and all the authors have their own social media pages. But if you're a fan, please do follow us on social media. Please leave a review, whether written or 5-star. Those are very, very helpful. I mean, obviously, if you don't feel like you want to give 5 stars, that's your prerogative. But leaving a review is still helpful to get this podcast out to other book lovers such as yourselves. Make sure you subscribe. Do all those wonderful things that help us out. And, of course, I hope you will join me next time. I will be speaking with author Anna Pennenberg, but not only Anna, I will also be speaking with Anna and her daughter, Dana. The book is called Dancing in the Narrows, a Mother-Daughter Odyssey Through Chronic Illness. Again, connections, because we had this lovely story of Ryder written by his mother, and this one is a mother-daughter journey. And although Dana is not listed as an author on the book, she will be joining us to talk about, the book is about her. The book is about her journey with discovering that she had Lyme disease and how to treat that and everything that went along with that journey. So I hope you will join me for that. I'm looking forward to interviewing a mother-daughter duo. So that will be on the next episode of the GSMC Book Review Podcast. Hope you're having a great day. Hope that your day, your week, whatever, involves plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.GSMC.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.